John Longworth said to have been pushed out of the business lobby group, the British Chambers of Commerce. When Longworth said he preferred the exit, he stirred up a hornet's nest.
I have come to the conclusion that the European Union is incapable of meaningful reform.
There were no tears in Downing Street.
Let's be honest, everybody knows that your position is changing week by week, and now you've got the cheap. Increasing numbers of people in the Labour Party at the conference this week are talking about a second referendum. So no second referendum. Crystal clear. Has everybody heard that? Crystal clear.
No second referendum.
Excellent.
Is it a clever plan? Does it really stick to the red lines that Theresa May set out?
I'm amazed Andrea's saying this. I mean, it clearly doesn't stick to the red lines. It isn't Brexit. It leaves supporters who are supporting Leave Means Leave incandescent with rage.
We need to get on with it. The government needs to get a grip and accelerate the process.
Please welcome to the stage John Longworth and Richard Tice.
Welcome, Brexiteers! So pleased to have you here today in this beautiful town of Harrogate. I'm particularly pleased to be here because, by pure coincidence, it happens to be my hometown. Now, I learned a thing today, actually, that this place, this wonderful auditorium, opened in 1982. And guess what the very first event was that was here? It was the Eurovision Song Contest. And I'm absolutely sure that if we had one of those today, it would be nil point to the EU. My personal journey of Brexit began nearly 40 years ago. I've been in business all my life. And in my very first role, I had the job, a part of my job anyway, of going to see the people in Brussels and understanding what was going on there. And whatever role I took up, however senior ever since, because I knew a little bit about what was going on there, I had the job of finding out what they were up to, what schemes they were planning, what game they were up to. And because I actually knew a little bit about it, because I understood what game they had afoot, I voted to leave in 2016. Not because I was stupid and ignorant and racist, which is what the Remainers say, but because I knew better than most what the EU were trying to do. And my journey in 2016 had a particularly personal element to it too. Because in 2016, I was the Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce. And we'd written to the Prime Minister a year before, setting out what it was that we thought he needed to do in the negotiations with the European Union. We set out 5 things that he needed to do, and when he came back with his rubbish piece of paper, we found he'd done none of them. So I decided I had to speak out. I had to speak out because of the terrible Project Fear that the government were running that I knew was lies and deceits. So I spoke out. And of course, what happened was Number 10 went absolutely mad and put massive pressure on my organisation to shut me up. So I decided I needed to resign, to speak out and campaign to leave the European Union. But who would have thought 2.5 years later we would still be here after the biggest vote that the UK has ever seen, still fighting the establishment to leave. On that ballot paper, it didn't say your choice is between leaving and having a rubbish deal where we're half in and half out. It said your choice is between leaving and remaining. It said just leave. And that's what we should do. We should just leave. And we're here today to send a very loud message, louder than those people outside, a loud message to number 10 that leave really does mean leave. And in these rallies, this is the 6th rally we've had around the country in our Save Brexit tour of Britain. It's the 6th and final one in this series, but we'll be back. And in these rallies, we've had 100,000 people at home in every single one of them watching on live stream. So when you shout in this hall today, you'll be saying to those people at home, you're not alone. We want to leave. We've had 1 million people watch a live stream over the last 6 weeks. People in this country want to leave the European Union. Well, I'm proud to be here in Harrogate supporting Leave. I'm proud to be British, and I'm proud to be the chairman of Leave Means Leave. And I thank you all for coming here today and giving us your support. We've got some great speakers, but before we hear from them, let me first introduce our vice chairman and the founder of Leave Means Leave, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Richard Tice.
Good afternoon. It's fantastic to see everyone here. We shouldn't be here, of course. But the reason we're here, ladies and gentlemen, is because we are angry. We're furious at the incompetence of the government's negotiation of leaving the European Union. It's like a national humiliation. It's unbelievable. And they've come up with this plan, the Chequers proposal, which are now, of course, is sort of Chequers minus, minus, minus. It's a shockingly bad proposal, and there's only one thing to do with it. We need to chuck Chequers in the bin. Then, just to compound her folly, the Prime Minister thought it would be a good idea this week to extend the transition period that we don't need in the first place. She wants to extend it another year. She didn't say, did she, that that would cost over £20 billion additional fee? She talked about it as though it's like a round of drinks, 20 billion. That's as much as she's planning to invest in our NHS. And to her, it's a round of drinks that she can toss away. When I launched Leave Means Leave shortly after the referendum, I somewhat naively thought, well, we might need to help the government and support it for 6 months or so until they get this done. Here we are, 2.25 years later. We're relaunching the campaign. As John said, we've had rallies up and down the country. Over 1 million people have viewed us on live stream. And yes, good news, folks. Hopefully you saw it outside. The battle bus is back. Now, I have to be honest, we had a lot of fun working out what to put on the side of the bus. A lot of fun. All sorts of suggestions came forward. Being a businessman and liking big numbers, I wanted to put a really big number on the side. I wanted to say, save 39 billion. If it had been this week, I'd have said, save 59 billion. Anyway, but I'm a Democrat, and actually the team outvoted me, so we didn't put the number on the side of the bus. You know, there's still a lot we can do to influence this process, because it's not over yet, folks. We need everybody here, and your friends, family, to write to your MPs, to turn up to their constituency surgeries, and to make it absolutely clear what we Leavers expect of our MPs. We want them to chuck Chequers. We want them to believe in Britain. We don't want them to sign up to a bad deal, because all of us in business know that no deal is better than a bad deal. In fact, the truth is, as you can see on some of these banners, no deal, no problem, by the way, no money. So, we've got 3 great speakers, the first of which, and we're a cross-party group, the first of which is the Labour MP for Vauxhall since 1989. She is an absolutely committed Brexiteer, a lady of incredible integrity and strong principles. She just says it as it is, what she believes in it. And she's had amazing courage and bravery because she's had to put up with some hideous abuse, threats, trying to deselect her just for what she believes in. Because she knows that a proper Brexit helps the least well off the most. And that's an incredibly noble thing to fight for. Before we welcome Kate Hoey to the stage, ladies and gentlemen, let's just see a few clips of her in action on the screen.
His final sentence where he said that we should be staying in the customs union and we should be staying in the single market, what he really was saying, we should be staying in the EU. You may think I'm talking absolute nonsense. There's 17.5 million people out there who don't think I'm thinking. Anyone who votes against this principle of the second reading is really betraying the will of the British people.
Please welcome to the stage, Kate Hoey, MP.
For that wonderful welcome. It is great to be here on this cross-party platform supporting Leave Means Leave and putting our country first, and our country should always come above our party. We're here, as Richard has said, we shouldn't really be here. We had a clear vote to leave. We know that people knew what they wanted to vote for, even though we're being told that they were stupid, that they didn't know what they were voting for, that they were racists. You knew what you were voting for. We all knew what we were voting for, and we were voting to leave. And all those people out there protesting today, and those people in London who will be protesting, it's not really anymore a question about leave or remain. It's a question of being democratic or anti-democratic. And I get very angry when I see the London elite, the London establishment, making their views as if they know more than everyone else in the rest of the country. And they really should get out of London more and come to places like this. So we don't need, the message today is we don't need another vote. We just want to leave. Now, as a Labour MP, I am concerned that for those millions of Labour supporters and voters across the country, that many of them are now beginning to feel that they are being betrayed, not just by the government, but possibly by their own party. And that makes me very sad indeed. And I feel strongly that in the last election, the last general election, the manifesto of the Labour Party was very clear. We were going to stick to the referendum, honour the votes of the British people, leave the single market and leave the customs union. Very clear. So not only did we have all those people voting for the referendum, but we had at the general election the two main parties all supporting leaving and honouring the referendum. So there is no argument about it. And I don't feel at all lonely in the party, although I'm pretty alone in Parliament. We've got Frank Field and Graham Stringer and John Mann and Kelvin Hopkins and a few others. And remember, there are some MPs who did vote to remain, who are wanting to honour the referendum and who are going to ensure that we don't have a second referendum. But the problem is that there are some in my party and some in Parliament who are doing everything possible to make sure that we delay and delay and delay. And this latest idea of extending the transition has to be fought against. We must not allow that to happen. But I always remind people, and some of the slightly younger members of Parliament on my side of the House, I always try to remind them that people like myself and Frank Field and all the others are actually following in the footsteps of those people in our past history of the Labour movement, people like Hugh Gateskill, Peter Shore, Tony Benn, and of course one of my great heroines, Barbara Castle. Every one of them would still be involved in this if they were here today, because they understood way back in the early 70s what the common market was all about, what it was going to do to our country, what it was going to do to our democracy. And they knew then that Brussels would want to take more and more power away from us, and that's what they've done. We are the true democrats in the country. The people who are out there calling for a second referendum, interestingly, it's the same people, isn't it, who first of all wanted us to join the euro, but also all those people who really have decided that they know best. I mean, we have people like Tony Blair coming from, and then we have Michael Heseltine, and then of course our favourite, Nick Clegg. And of course Nick Clegg has now gone off to get a big job in the United States of America. Now, I think also we have to remind people when they say that Parliament, you know, has to be supreme on this, Parliament must make all these decisions, and that the people's vote didn't really matter. Of course, we saw all those treaties go through year after year in Parliament where we never, ever got a vote. The original decision to go in, the accession treaty, we weren't asked, did we want to join the common market? Yes, we were asked 2 years later. But we weren't asked when we went in. We weren't asked, the people were not asked about the Maastricht Treaty, about the Single Market Act, about Amsterdam, about Nice, about Lisbon. Every single one of those went through, and without people having a say. So I think that this is, the referendum we did get was an absolutely crucial vote for the future of our country. And of course the EU thought, when they lost, and they lost because they thought we were going to vote to remain, they thought we would do what they've done in the past, have another referendum. That's what they've always done. The Republic of Ireland voted against the Lisbon Treaty, they had another referendum. In Holland, they voted against the treaty, they had another referendum. And they thought that we would do the same. But we are British, and we are not going to be doing that kind of thing. And the message really is that they cannot take us for granted. They may be taking the Prime Minister for granted, they may be taking the government for granted, but they won't take the people of this country for granted. Now, I just want to say a few words about Northern Ireland, because I come from there originally. I care deeply about Northern Ireland. And of course, it's now become the issue, the border issue has become the issue that has been built up to be this huge, huge, huge sticking point. First of all, we have to remind the government and remind everyone that Northern Ireland is an integral part of the United Kingdom, and we can never allow any part of it to have a different arrangement from the rest of the United Kingdom. And we have to remember and remind the Prime Minister, because she seems to have forgotten too, that the only reason there's ever been a hard border with infrastructure and cameras and police and so on was when we had a terrorist group called the Irish Republican Army who would be coming over and bringing over bombs and ammunition to blow up our British soldiers and our British police officers. That is why we had a hard border. And there was absolutely nothing in the Belfast Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement. One word, I think, about the border was mentioned. It was not part and an instrumental part of the Good Friday Agreement. But the idea that, you know, the Belfast Agreement only came about because of the EU is just such complete nonsense. And how can we get ourselves into a situation where we've now got the Taoiseach of the Republic of Ireland, Varadkar, actually saying, implying really that it's more important you know, if we do something about the border, if there is any kind of border there, that the dissidents, the terrorists will come back. Well, I find that quite shocking, because he should be saying, we're going to take on these terrorists, we're going to take on these people, and we're not going to allow them to shape our policy, either of the Republic of Ireland or the United Kingdom. So I think the behaviour of the Irish government has been shocking. And I just had one message this week from someone in Northern Ireland, a young woman who sent me this message, and she'd seen some of the things that Varadkar had been saying. And she said, terrorists took my mother. Don't let them take my vote and that of 17 million more as well. And I think that sums it up. So, what can we do? Well, I think we have to be more confident. I think it's shocking the way everyone who's on the Remain side, and particularly those in the establishment, and of course the media. I mean, the media have not exactly been impartial, I think, on this issue. But I think it's shocking the way they have actually run the country down. The idea that somehow, as the 5th biggest economy in the world, we are not capable of running ourselves, of being independent. It is just unimaginable that some of those people that we have elected into power to run our country really feel that they would prefer to have other countries and a Brussels unelected bureaucracy running us. So I think we have to now fight back, and the fight back is beginning again. You know, we took democracy for granted. I took it for granted. I was thrilled, absolutely so thrilled, when we won that referendum. I didn't expect it to be here. I didn't expect to have to fight to get what people had voted for in the biggest ever vote. And we have to now say, right across the country, that we're not going to allow this happen, that this is about democracy far, far more than about economics. The European Commission want to squeeze out democracy and take more and more control. We have to be confident. We have to make sure that our members of Parliament know what we think about this, and we have to go and see them, not just write letters. And we have to challenge all the doom and the gloom, and we have to actually challenge the government to recognise that the clock is ticking. But we're not afraid of the clock ticking, because we know that actually a no deal isn't coming off the cliff edge, as the media would like to portray it. A no deal is actually going on to World Trade Organization rules the way the vast majority of the rest of the world trade. So what is the problem? So we need a clean Brexit. We need to challenge all those moaners and Remainers who feel that they can know better than the 17.4 million people. And we need to make sure, all of you who are here, who are Labour supporters, make sure that under the leadership of our party, we will not renege on the referendum, and we will not say that we are going to give in to extra transition in getting rid of Article 50 and on gradually going to a situation where we will be half in, half out. That's not what we voted for, and we are not going to let it happen. Thank you.
Well done, Kate. Brilliant. Isn't she great, ladies and gentlemen? If only there were about another 600 MPs with her courage and her convictions. And we hear this nonsense about the People's March today and the People's Vote. Are we not people? Did we not have a People's Vote in 2016? I think we did. I think we won it, which makes them the losers. So actually, it's a loser's vote. And you'll be pleased to know that I organised this morning for 3 advans to be on the route of the march. And on the advan, we've got the People's Vote logo. And we scratched out in red the word peoples, and we put losers. Anyway, as you can imagine, they're a bit grumpy about this. At the last count, there were a dozen police officers protecting the driver at the ad van. To our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, who needs little introduction, but it is worth just reminding ourselves what he has achieved as he has battled for this cause over the last 25 years. He's probably, in fact he is, the original Brexiteer. And slowly but surely, over that time, he has changed the course of British political history. And he will definitely go down as one of the most influential figures since the Second World War in British politics. The courage that he has demonstrated is enormous. Abuse, vilification, threats to his own security and that of his family. Unbelievable. It would put most people off. But no, not our Nigel. A small altercation in a light plane crash in 2010. He dragged himself out. He wiped away the blood from his tears. He dusted down his immaculate suit. And the first thing he did, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a fag and lit it. He is a true patriot, ladies and gentlemen. Before we welcome him to the stage, let's just see him in action on some recent clips.
It sounds as if you smell betrayal in the air.
The compromise that she put forward at Chequers last week, the PM's country home, frankly was a betrayal. I'm going to try and get the people to let their members of Parliament know they will not accept being betrayed. And I tell you what, if I have to do this again, next time, no more Mr. Nice Guy. We had a referendum. We voted for something. Our politicians should deliver this.
We have made our minds up in the greatest democratic exercise in the history of this country.
I trust the voice of the people more than the politicians.
Please welcome to the stage, Nigel Farage.
Hello, Harrogate! Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, as we're gathered here today on the 6th of our round-the-country meetings, which, as John Longworth said earlier, have so far been watched by those that attend, but those watching live on their computers at home now by well over 1 million people. As we're doing that, in London, there is a whole load of students who have been bussed in from all over the country. Quite why the British youth at the moment, through our universities, think it's better for us to be run by a bunch of unelected old men in Brussels who we can't vote for and can't remove is beyond me, but that's where they are. And of course, funded by George Soros and big business, they've got with them many of the mainstream career politicians from Westminster. And what you'll notice is a lot of them today will be holding up that loathsome flag. Do you know the one I mean? That European Union flag. So what I want to do now is maybe just address one or two of the points that they've made. Now, why don't we start off by sending the so-called People's Vote a message. This is our flag. All right? This is our flag, not some artificial star-spangled banner that represents an undemocratic, anti-democratic, increasingly authoritarian European Union that country by country is now being loathed across the whole of Europe. And they have the audacity to call themselves the People's Vote. Well, we had the People's Vote, didn't we? We had it back in 2016, and Leave won that referendum, and that should be that. And what do you think? Think of the advantages they had. They had the mass battalions of our senior politicians from the last quarter of a century. They had Sir John Major saying Leave would be a disaster. They had Tony Blair saying Leave would be a disaster. We had the former Deputy Prime Minister, Sir Nick Clegg, telling us that Leave would be a disaster. And now we learn that Nick is emigrating. He's obviously realised that his dream of a second referendum simply isn't going to happen. He's off to work for Facebook on a salary, a huge salary of $1 million a year. And it all goes to prove you don't need free movement of people for low-skilled employees to find work. That really worked today. I like that one. And they had the money, didn't they? And they had government money. Do you remember David Cameron spending 9 million quid of your money to put that leaflet through every door in this country telling us that Brexit would be a disaster? And how I enjoyed walking up Downing Street and posting it back through his own front door, I can tell you. But despite that, oh, and I nearly forgot, global leaders including President Obama, coming to tell us that we be at the back of the queue, and some would say some pretty questionable impartiality coming from our state broadcaster, the BBC, also. But nonetheless, whatever advantages they have, I'm saying this to you folks rallying in London today, we won that referendum despite the advantages, despite the threats. Do you remember what Osborne told us? I mean, you should never get personal in politics. You should try and avoid getting personal in politics. But he really, that pasty-faced, ghastly individual, I'm pleased. Quite restrained for me, I thought. Didn't spend long enough in Wetherspoons, obviously, earlier on today. But the point is, we had these terrible threats being made. Hello, you're welcome. You're welcome. That's all right. You're in the wrong place. You should be in London. It's getting like a Trump rally, isn't it? Well, that's all right. We believe in free speech. We believe in free speech. We believe in democracy, sir. And if you believe in democracy, you will respect the greatest democratic vote ever held in this country's history. But, you know, even more important than the fact we won that referendum are the terms upon which it was won. We were told, were we not, by both of our major parties in that referendum that whatever the result was, it would be respected. We were told in that leaflet that Cameron put through our doors that whatever the result of the referendum, it would be implemented. This, ladies and gentlemen, now, where we are today, is about something absolutely fundamental in a country such as ours, with its tradition of parliamentary democracy, with its tradition of standing up and fighting at great cost, not just for our liberty, but actually for the liberty of other European peoples and European countries too. And we are now at a moment we are now at perhaps the most important moment in the story, our island's story of democratic self-government. Because what this is about today, and the reason that many of us have come back out of relative retirement to join the Leave Means Leave campaign, is what this is about now. It is about trust in our entire democratic system. That is what is at stake here now. Because we didn't just vote once to leave the European Union, to leave the single market, to leave the customs union. Oh, yes, and to take back control of our borders so that we can get immigration back to sensible, sustainable levels in this country. Every single major player on both the Leave and the Remain side said the consequence of voting Leave is we would leave the single market and the customs union. It couldn't be clearer. When they tell us we didn't know what we were voting for in their high-handed, arrogant manner, we voted to become an independent, self-governing country. Every person in this room and around this country knows we voted to leave the European Union and all of its structures. Simple. We didn't just vote for this once, we voted for it twice. Because a year later, remember, there was a general election. A general election Theresa May would probably rather forget. But in that general election, it's perfectly clear what the government's manifesto said. It said explicitly, we'll be leaving the single market, we'll be leaving the customs union, and Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party said exactly the same thing too, and 85% of the votes that were cast in that general election in 2017 were on the basis that whoever formed the government, we would leave the EU, the single market and the customs union. And now we have a Prime Minister who has been spouting for the last 2 years, Brexit means Brexit, who I saw this week at that European summit, because don't forget, I'm not completely retired, I am still an MEP. They're thrilled when I turn up every week over there, I can tell you. Well, I tell you, I have more fun than they do, I've got to tell you. But I was there at that summit. I felt embarrassed to be British as I watched our leader once again being humiliated. I watched our leader once again capitulate. I watched our leader, who when she tells us Brexit means Brexit, clearly now really what she means is Brexit means Remain. It is a betrayal of what we voted for. But it isn't just her and the leadership of the Conservative Party, it is the Labour Party too. 5 million people who voted Brexit in 2016 voted for the Labour Party in that election in 2017. And now, you know, I heard Keir Starmer, their Brexit spokesman, saying clearly on the radio last week that Labour also wanted to keep Britain inside a customs union. They are all trying to kick the can down the road. They effectively want the transition period to go on until the next general election, when we could get a government that simply never takes us out. That is how crucial this next few months in our island story is. It matters, and it matters a lot. The question is, what can you do? Well, one thing I learned leading a new political party and movement that started to take votes in very large numbers from both the Conservative and the Labour Party, the one thing I've learned is all our career politicians really fear is losing votes, because losing votes means they could lose their jobs. So what we need to do, we need to kick them in the ballot box. We need to kick them where it hurts. We need you and hundreds of thousands of you across the country, millions of you, to do something that perhaps you've never done before. On the back of these leaflets that are on your chair, you will see the names, addresses, telephone numbers and emails for all the MPs in Harrogate and the surrounding area. I'll bet that over the years, only a tiny percentage of this room have ever written to their MP, and I'll bet an even smaller number have ever gone along to a surgery to meet their MP. You see, the point is, folks, in the comfort of Westminster, they think they can give us Brexit in name only, and they think they can get away with it. They think we are too placid, too docile, and too stupid to stand up and fight for what is rightfully ours, the result of that referendum that happened on June the 23rd, 2016. So I want you to do different. I want you not just to write to your MP, I want you queuing outside their offices the next time they hold a surgery. I want you to tell them that if they betray the Brexit vote, they will never, ever get your vote at an election ever again. Let's make our members of Parliament, let's make those who would betray the Brexit vote, let's make them start to feel the heat. Please help us in doing that. The funny thing is, in many ways, we're not that far away. For all the coverage you'll see this evening of this march in London today, remember, consistently in the opinion polls, only about 20% of the country want to stay in the European Union on current terms. We are now in a clear majority because amongst those that voted Remain, a significant number say, do you know what? I didn't vote that way, but I'm a Democrat. I respect the result. The common phrase that I hear going around this country from people is, let's just get on with it. Yeah? That's the common phrase that I hear. And if at the 11th hour this Prime Minister can be forced from her negotiating position, or if not that, forced from office, because it may come to that in the next few weeks, we can go to the European Union and say, right, we will do a simple, grown-up free trade deal with you, but if you decide to cut off your nose to spite your face, if you decide that you don't actually represent the German car industry or the French wine industry, then we will leave on World Trade Organization rules. No deal, no problem. No problem. No problem. We are led by, without doubt, the most dishonest, worst, most insincere political class in the history of this country. They believe they can rob us of this great prize of independence for our country, self-determination, democracy, the ability to re-engage with our friends around the rest of the world. And our message from this hall today and out through the rest of this campaign, for however long it takes, is the referendum was our first victory, and we will go on winning. Kept the time.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, just like this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, he hasn't lost his touch, has he? In fact, I think he's just warming up again. Quite right. So, to our third speaker, ladies and gentlemen, from the Conservative Party, he's been an MP in the House of Commons since 1997 for North Shropshire, and he's been Secretary of State for Northern Ireland for 2 years, and also Secretary of State for the Department of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. So he really understands some of the key issues that this government is allowing itself to be bogged down about. He's a passionate Brexiteer. He campaigned tirelessly during the referendum up and down the country. And before we welcome Owen Paterson to the stage, let's just see some clips of him in action.
What sort of a country is this? Who actually makes our laws? Who raises our taxes? If they pass bad laws and spend our tax money badly, what do we do about it? One of the biggest advantages for me of not having a deal, the famous no deal, we could go to World Trade Organization terms, we could immediately take back control of our own waters, and we could immediately begin to run our own waters in a more sane manner. Lots of economists say this will be a huge boom for the UK because we could reduce prices. I'm absolutely clear that we have to deliver this. I mean, much the most important point in all this is if we do not deliver a proper Brexit, there will be absolutely appalling damage to the integrity of the whole establishment.
Please welcome to the stage, Owen Paterson, MP.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Harrogate. And Richard and John, wherever John's gone, many congratulations for founding Leave Means Leave and putting on these tremendous events. And thank you very much, Kate and Nigel, who played a huge role in where we've got to today. And they both touched on the main theme. On referendum day, towards the end of the afternoon, probably 5, 6 o'clock, I went to the Civic Centre in Whitchurch, the town where I was born, where I get 6 polling stations in one building in one hit. And I went to the polling officer, and he said, we just never seen anything like it. It's extraordinary. Just the numbers, they're pouring in. And they don't know what to do. They've never voted. These people had gone to all the trouble of registering in order to vote. And a couple of guys came off a building site covered in dust, and they saw me with my Vote Leave stickers on. They said, good to see you here, Mr. Paterson. We can get rid of you. We can vote you out. We can't get rid of them. It's about them, isn't it? We can't get rid of them. And that is what this is about. This is a fundamental question of democracy. Can you get rid of the people who make laws, and if you don't like the laws, can you get rid of them? No. Can you get rid of the people who really levy money on you, and if they don't spend the money properly, can you get rid of them? No. That is where we've got to now. And as Nigel whizzed through, we have a very, very clear track record of voting on this. David Cameron, probably under pressure from Nigel, played a huge role in this, said if you vote Tory in the 2015 election, I guarantee I will give you a referendum. And you will have the choice. It won't come back to Parliament, and the Tories happily won that election, and he had his so-called renegotiation, went nowhere, and then we had a referendum, and it was made very, very clear in the bill, that the referendum bill, that this would be the people's decision. The House of Commons was handing over to the people the decision. No coming back, no second referendum, no second choice. You're in it, boys. You're on your own, boys. You make this decision. As Nigel touched on, helpfully lobbed in 9 million of our money to try and tell us we were complete idiots if we voted to leave, but we did vote to leave. 17.4 million voted to leave. And then what happens? We have a general election. All the Remainers say, oh, nobody says what leave meant. There was all sorts of ideas in the Leave campaign. Although we were pretty clear in the Leave campaign it meant leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, leaving the remit of the criminal justice. And what happens? The election manifesto says very clearly, and remember this, every single Conservative member of Parliament was elected on a manifesto commitment to interpret the leave vote of the referendum by leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, and leaving the remit of the European Court of Justice. And if you've got a Tory MP, don't let him or her forget it. And if you've got a Labour MP, the Labour Party, very helpfully, also endorsed that plan. And that was their interpretation of the leave vote. So, as Nigel said, 85% of votes in the general election, and there's a big vote. Mrs May didn't get the seats because we haven't organised the boundaries properly, but she got the second largest number of votes since John Major in 1992, far more than Blair ever got. So that gives two very, very clear democratic endorsements of what's going on. Now, where we got to now is we've made good progress. We had 494 members voting for Article 50. We've triggered Article 50. We've had the Withdrawal Act. And as we are this afternoon, we are heading to leave at the end of March because we have repealed the European Communities Act 1972. And we will be leaving on world trade terms at the moment because we have no deal. All this stuff about... No deal is not leaping off a cliff and leaping into the dark. It is world trade terms. It would be optimal, absolutely right, it would be optimal to have a free trade deal. That would be the best. Some people talk about Canada Plus, but I'd say a wide-ranging free trade deal as offered by President Tusk in March. That is where we should obviously be going. Where we are at the moment is that we've offered the Chequers proposal, which is wholly unacceptable. And because where we will be with Chequers is that we will not be present when laws are made. When I was the DEFRA Secretary, I was involved in the CAP negotiations. I went to every single possible meeting. And we stopped some of the stupider things happening. We worked closely with the Hungarians on some stuff, with the Germans and others. We had alliances. But it was still a pretty bad CAP reform, as many farmers here will know. From now on, if Chequers goes through, we won't be there. 27 member states will cook up law and regulation. There will be no British pebble in the shoe trying to hold things back. There will be no British representation on technology or trying to go for freer enterprise and more commercial ideas. That law will come to us. It'll be imposed upon us, we can't amend it, we can't repeal it, and there's a token idea there'll be some parliamentary scrutiny that won't. There's not been a single SI ever, statutory instrument ever, thrown out by the House of Commons, because we can't. We tried one day when I was on the European Affairs Committee, a Liberal got stuck in the lift, a Labour MP was ill, and the Labour government at the time still wouldn't let us even debate it. We couldn't repeal it. And that's what means by not making laws. Think where our agriculture would be. Think where our fisheries would be if we could make our own decisions. There's a wholly nonsense idea out there that European law is benign and European regulation is good. Tell that to the youth of Spain, of Greece, and these other countries. Take agriculture as one example, and let's talk about two countries separate from us. If France had the same productivity in maize as the United States of America, it would produce 6.1 million tons more maize every year. Or it would free up 500,000 hectares for forestry other activities, whatever you want. That is how far Europe is sliding behind. Take the common fisheries policy. It is absolutely disgraceful that we throw back about 1 million tonnes. We don't know, of course, because the whole discard thing is a complete nonsense, but we throw back 1 million tonnes of completely healthy fish back into the sea. That is really shocking. We have some of the most fertile fishing grounds in the world, and we would bring back wealth, jobs, and prosperity to some of our most remote coastal communities. So why aren't we going for an all-encompassing free trade deal? Partly, as Kate touched on, there's the Northern Ireland border. Now, this is soluble. I've been working recently with the European Research Group. We put out a paper on this, working with people who've got real experience. There's an organisation called Chelcat this week who published a report. 19,000 freight forwarding companies handling 80% of custom transactions across Europe. They have said that the basis of checkers cannot work for 5 to 10 years. The facilitated customs arrangement is a completely new idea. Interesting, they say, it won't work. What we should do is go to existing technologies, existing processes within existing law. Because actually, Northern Ireland trades very little with the Republic of Ireland. Only 4.9% of its sales go south. The sales going south are nearly all repetitive shipments of regular products. The same milk, from the same cows, the same farm, the same truck, on the same road, to the same dairy, every day of the week. That is actually perfectly suited to many customs arrangements which can be set up on a regular basis. Guinness, 13,000 trans-border shipments every year. Huge multinational. This is all doable with existing arrangements if you talk to professionals in places like Rotterdam who do this every day of the week, not to a sadly ill-informed civil servants talking to expensive consultants in London. So it is doable. There is time still to chuck checkers, because checkers is going nowhere. The technicians, the customs officers say it won't work. People like me are not going to vote for it, and the European Union hate it.
Get your letters as well.
So what we want to do is get the unity of purpose, which got us through Article 50, the Withdrawal Act, and to push on fast with a wide-ranging free trade agreement which enables us to take full control of our laws and our money. And I'll end on that. Yesterday I went to a primary school in my constituency. They're trying to teach young children in a 1950s building, which the heating is so bad in winter, the children have to wear coats. It's so hot in summer, they can't learn. Why should those parents, my constituents, send 39 billion to the European Union? We don't need to pay to trade with our friends the Americans. We don't need to pay to trade with our friends in China. We don't need to pay to trade with our friends in Europe. And our sales to the rest of the world are going up, and our sales to Europe are sadly going down from 61% to 45%. It's going to be 35% soon. The growth in the world is going to be outside Europe, according to the European Union Commission. They say 95% of world growth in the next 20 years outside Europe. And some economists say there is only one continent with a slower rate of growth than Europe, and that is Antarctica. So, we voted to leave twice in the referendum and the general election. Go to every one of those MPs, Conservative or Labour, and remind them that they have a commitment to deliver that vote. And that means leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, leaving the remit of the ECJ. Thank you very much.
As you've heard, ladies and gentlemen, someone who really understands how it works, who knows it can be done, and it's just such a tragedy that our civil servants don't have that confidence, that understanding and that belief in Britain. Now, before we finish, we're going to have a question and answer session, and we're going to welcome to the stage the author and political commentator to conduct this question and answer, Isabel Oakeshott.
Right. Owen, where are you? I did promise you I wasn't going to ask you this, but I heard some comments from the floor. Have you got your letter in? And I'm just not sure you can escape that question. I think we can bring it to the question that we have from Keith from Bishop Auckland, who puts it rather more delicately. He says Theresa May is temporary, but her bad deal will be permanent. So are we powerless to one woman's bad choices? Owen?
No, because we won't vote for it. I've said very publicly, I hope there was a whip at my meeting. I very much hope a member of the Conservative Party whips off is watching this in case they missed what I said at the conference, because I did ask them to take a note back then, and in case my own whip was half asleep, I will not vote for Chequers. Stop!
Well, that was simple, wasn't it? Last night we had a rally in Gateshead, and it was absolutely fantastic. And one of the things that really heartened me about that rally was how many young people there were there, which was sometimes feels quite unusual. Sometimes it feels that Brexit events are more populated by some of the older vote Leave supporters, but there is a strong contingent for Leave among young people. Nonetheless, Trevor from Glasgow, who's come all the way here from Glasgow, by the way, that is dedication. There he is.
His sign, look.
He the one who's listening.
I love that sign. Isn't he so right? Isn't it an It's an absolute outrage that he is not Sir Nigel. But anyway, Nigel, perhaps I can ask you, why do you think so many younger people felt compelled to vote Remain in the referendum first time round, and hopefully there won't be a second time round?
Well, I don't think they knew what they were voting for.
Hey.
No, and I mean that. No, I really, really mean that. I think they're being told that the European Union is all about love and peace, and there's not going to be any war, and it's all wonderful. And what they're not told is the completely undemocratic nature of a European Commission that have the sole right to make legislation. What they're not being told is the way that, for example, just this week, the democratically elected government of Italy have had their budget rejected by Mr. Juncker. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? This is, I mean, what is happening here is a victory of bureaucracy over democracy. But I'm afraid, Isabel, deep within the education system, and it is not just at the universities, I'm afraid there is a bias, a huge, huge bias. It is way to the left of centre. It is globalist. It believes in total free movement of people across the world. Well, it sounds like a lovely idea, but it just doesn't work, does it? That's the point. And I feel and I fear, actually, our youngsters are having their minds poisoned at British universities. And I really mean that. And I will say one more thing. And it is time we had a political leader that said, we will not put up with this. We are going to make sure that genuine free speech happens at British universities, and until it does, we will withhold state funding for universities. That's what needs to happen. I really mean it.
So just thinking about leadership, I'm sure a lot of people here today are actually Labour supporters. And so I'm really keen to hear from you, Kate, how you feel about the way that the Labour Party leadership has handled this. Because you referenced in your very powerful speech about these Labour greats who, you know, were Eurosceptic from the start. And in fact, we know that Jeremy Corbyn was Eurosceptic right up until it mattered.
Yes, I'll answer that, Isabel. Can I just say on that previous question, because last night in Gateshead, a lady came up to me at the end with her teenage daughter, and they told me how that day her daughter had mentioned in the school that she was coming to the rally last night, and how the teachers had actually said to her, you shouldn't be going to that. Now, that is shocking for a teenage girl in a school. And then the other thing on the same issue, you know, wasn't that shocking too, the way some of the leadership of the Remain campaign have talked about all these older people who are going to be dead soon? Yeah. You know, that is the kind of, if that's the kind of leadership of the Remain campaign, well, we all know why we're here today. On Labour, I mean, the Parliamentary Labour Party, it has a majority of Remain MPs, absolutely no doubt about it, but 70% of our constituencies voted to leave. Now, I'm in the opposite position in that I'm a London MP, and as you know, London voted to remain, although a third of Londoners voted to leave. We sometimes forget that, and my own constituency is a very strong Remain constituency, but I have met many of my constituents who do say, as Nigel mentioned earlier, you know, they just want to get on with it now. But Jeremy Corbyn has always been an EU sceptic, and in every single lobby division there's been, since I've been in Parliament, on issues to do with the EU, he has been in the same lobby as myself and Kelvin and a whole group of Labour MPs. He is obviously trying to keep the party together, and he, you know, behind the scenes, I think he has done some manoeuvring to try and stop having a straightforward vote at conference, which would have been saying we want a second referendum. He is pushing the general election idea. But, you know, out there in the country, Labour supporters and Labour members know that we are very near, with Sir Keir Starmer, to betraying the votes that people voted for. And I hope that we will be able to stop that happening. But ultimately, it's only the people in the country can stop it happening.
Thank you. So we're almost at the point of wrapping up now, and I'm now going to hand back over to the chairman of Leave Mean Leave, John Longworth, who I hope has reappeared. There he is.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was just reflecting on the question there, actually. When I made my fateful speech at the British Chambers of Commerce meeting in 2016, the one where I said I thought we'd do very well outside the European Union. When I left the stage, the next speaker on immediately came up to me, shook my hand and said, "What a fantastic speech," and how much that person agreed with what I was saying. That person was Jeremy Corbyn. So we're nearly coming to an end of our session today. There's a couple of three things I would like you to do for me before we wrap up. The first thing is to show your appreciation for the panel of speakers. So the next thing is, it can't be said enough. I mean, whether you are Brexit supporters or not, whether you're just interested in the fact that Theresa May has promised the European Union £600 for every man, woman and child in the country, or whether it's because you recognise that this is not just about Brexit anymore, but it's about democracy. write to your MP, go to see your MP. If it's not listed on the back of the leaflet, there's a website at the bottom that you can go on and you can type in your postcode and it will tell you who your MP is and where they can be contacted. Do that. Go on the Leave Means Leave website and sign up as a supporter. Let's make sure we get our independence. Now, the final thing I would like you to do for me, because this is being watched by 100,000 people at home, and because we want to send a really loud message to number 10, is I would like you to get hold of your banners and stand up. Stand up with your Leave Means Leave banners and your Save Brexit banners. Let's show the country what we think. Let's say it loudly. What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? Give yourselves a round of applause and have a safe journey home.